1897. British troops storm the royal palace of Benin. They return with thousands of bronze sculptures. Today, the British Museum values these at over $500 million. They refuse to give them back. This building holds 8 million objects, priceless artifacts from civilizations across the globe. But there's something they don't advertise on the guided tours. This is the story of how one institution turned colonialism into culture, and why they'll do anything to keep it that way. Let's start with something the museum doesn't want you thinking about. The numbers. Annual visitors, 5.8 million. Government funding, 47.4 million year. Merchandise revenue, 32 million year. Economic impact to London, 200+ million year. The British Museum is free to enter. Sounds generous, right? But look closer. Guidebooks, replicas, exhibition tickets, restaurant. The museum shop sells 90 replicas of the Rosetta Stone. They're monetizing objects they don't legally own by modern standards. The British Museum isn't just a museum. It's a brand, a business, an institution with $300 million in assets and over 1,000 employees. Internally, there are financial projections tied to specific artifacts. The Parthenon marbles alone drive millions in tourism. That's not preservation, that's profit. And here's where it gets interesting. The British Museum Act of 1963, a law that sounds boring until you realize what it actually does. The trustees shall not dispose of any object, except in accordance with this act. They legally cannot return objects, but here's what they don't tell you. There are exceptions for Nazi-looted art, for human remains, for duplicates. So when the museum says, "We'd love to help, but the law won't let us," they're lying. In 2019, leaked internal emails showed museum leadership discussing how to manage the repatriation narrative without actually changing policy. We must maintain position while appearing collaborative. Let's talk about who actually runs this place. The trustees, 25 board members, appointed by Prime Minister and Queen, include former politicians, corporate executives, aristocrats. Zero representation from source countries. Notice something, not a single trustee from Egypt, Greece, Nigeria, China, India. The people deciding whether to return artifacts have no cultural connection to them. In 2023, the museum's chairman was asked directly, "Will you return the Parthenon marbles? We believe these objects tell a global story that transcends national borders." No, but that global story argument, it's newer than you think. When the British Museum first acquired these objects, they weren't celebrating global heritage, they were celebrating empire. Trophies of British supremacy, proof of our civilizing mission. Rescued from barbarism, they've changed the language, but the power structure, exactly the same. And to understand why they'll never give these back willingly, we need to talk about how they got them in the first place. Because this isn't a story about archaeology. It's a story about empire, violence, and a legal loophole that's lasted 250 years. This gets darker. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The Parthenon marbles, 1801, Athens. The Parthenon, a 2,000-year-old temple, is occupied by the Ottoman Empire. Enter Lord Elgin, British ambassador to the Ottoman court. Wealthy, connected, ambitious. Elgin claims he received a firman, an official permission, from Ottoman authorities to remove sculptures. Here's the problem. The original firman has never been found. What exists is an Italian translation of a supposed English translation of an Ottoman document. Even if the firman existed and was legitimate, it gave permission to sketch and make casts, not to remove architectural elements with saws and chisels. Elgin's team spent a decade removing half the surviving sculptures using hammers, saws, crowbars. I was obliged to be a mere looker-on. It seemed like a sacrilege. Edward Dodwell, witness, 1805. Elgin spent $70,000 of his own money, about $8 million today, on the operation. Why invest that much in cultural preservation? Because in 1816, Elgin sold the marbles to the British government for $35,000. At a loss, spent $70,000. Sold for $35,000. Loss, $35,000. Except Elgin also received political favor with Parliament, social prestige among aristocracy, diplomatic appointments worth far more than cash. Today, those marbles are the centerpiece of the British Museum. Estimated value, priceless. And in Athens, the Acropolis Museum has a gallery specifically designed for them, with empty spaces, waiting. The museum's response? The Parthenon marbles are a vital part of our collection and will remain so. But if you think that's bad, wait until you hear about Nigeria. The Benin Bronzes. 1887, the Kingdom of Benin in present-day Nigeria, a sophisticated civilization with its own trade networks, political system, and artistic traditions dating back centuries. They created some of the finest bronze sculptures in human history. And then the British came. Punitive expedition, objective, secure trade routes and demonstrate British authority. On February 18, 1897, British forces attacked Benin City. They burned the royal palace, killed thousands. The city was destroyed. Everything of value was taken. The British Officer Report, 1897. Official military records show they looted over 3,000 bronze sculptures, ivory carvings, and royal regalia. And here's where it gets truly disgusting. Officers were allowed to keep pieces as trophies. Many immediately sold them at auction houses in London. Auction prices, 1897. Bronze head, 3. Royal plaque, 12 valve. Ivory tusk, 8. Today's values. Bronze head, 500,000 plus. Royal plaque, 2 million plus. Full collection, $500+ million. The British Museum acquired 900 pieces. They are now among the museum's most valuable objects. And unlike the Elgin marbles, there's no legal ambiguity here. The museum's own records label these as acquired during the Benin expedition of 1897. That's museum speak for we took them during a military attack. So if the museum knows how these objects were acquired, why haven't they returned them? Because they've spent decades building a legal fortress to prevent exactly that. The defense strategy: 1. Claim legal ownership. Objects were legally acquired under the laws of the time. That's technically true, but international law in 1897 was written by colonial powers. Asking if colonialism was legal under colonial law is circular logic. 2. Invoke the 1963 Act. We physically cannot return objects. It's against the law. Except they've returned objects before, to Australia, to Tasmania, using the exact same law. Exceptions should be made only when politically unavoidable. 3. The slippery slope argument. If we return these, we'll have to return everything. Where does it end? Do we send Roman artifacts back to Italy, Viking treasures to Scandinavia? Classic misdirection. Notice they never address why violently looted objects should be treated the same as archaeological finds. Repatriation requests. 1983. Greece formally requests Parthenon marbles. 2002. Nigeria requests Benin Bronzes. 2010. Egypt requests Rosetta Stone. Response to all: no. Meanwhile, other museums are moving in the opposite direction. Recent returns. France, 26 objects to Benin, 2021. Germany, 130 Benin Bronzes, 2022. Smithsonian, 39 Benin Bronzes, 2022. Netherlands, ongoing repatriation program. We prefer long-term loan arrangements that maintain legal ownership. You can borrow your own heritage, but we're keeping the receipt. In 2023, the museum offered to loan Benin Bronzes to Nigeria with conditions. Nigeria must acknowledge British Museum ownership. Objects must be returned on demand, renewable every 3 years. They want us to sign a document saying they own objects stolen from our palace. That's not a loan, that's humiliation. And here's the most revealing part. Remember those numbers from earlier? Economic impact. Tourism, 200+ million year. Merchandise, 32 million year. Government funding, 47 million year. If the British Museum returned its most contested objects, analysts estimate it would lose 15 to 20% of visitor traffic. This isn't about heritage. It's not about education. It's not about access. It's about money, power, and maintaining an institutional structure built on empire. The British Museum will tell you they're preserving world heritage. But preservation was never the goal. Possession was. Source countries now have world-class museums, conservation labs, climate control, security. So the argument that they can't care for them doesn't work anymore. The truth is simpler. The people who run the British Museum believe they have more right to these objects than the cultures that created them. When you walk through that museum, you're not seeing world heritage. You're seeing the spoils of war, organized by gallery. Here's what keeps me up at night about this. If the British Museum can acknowledge the Benin Bronzes were looted, if they can admit the Elgin Marbles were taken under questionable circumstances, and they still won't return them? That's not bureaucracy. That's not legal complexity. That's a choice, a deliberate choice to value institutional prestige over cultural justice. The British Empire is gone, but in this building, it never ended. As of January 2026, the British Museum has permanently returned 0 contested objects. If you think this story needs to be told, share this video. The museum won't change until enough people demand it. Next, how the Louvre makes the British Museum look generous. That video drops next week.